There's obviously a tremendous amount going on in the region that we focus on here with respect to Gaza, with respect to Iran, with respect to the Middle East more generally, and internally in Israel, and with respect to what I will refer to as the Trump factor. I'm going to jump in and ask Ari, please, to catch us up with an overview of where we are, and then we can unpack each of these individual topics.
In a few minutes to talk about the significance of the war and where the war is, the short history of it, and the outcome so far, before we dive into the specific issues of today and tomorrow. So first of all, I was in Be'eri, near the Gaza border a few days ago with one of the distinguished gentlemen in our conversation. And being there reminds you what this war is all about. I've said it before, but I think it's important to say. This is a war for the very existence of a Jewish nation. It's a war for the very existence of a democratic nation. And in my mind, it's a war that is deeply relevant to the entire free world. Because what you see, when you see the evil that we are facing there, what happened on October 7th and what is still there now, this is something that is still incomprehensible 16, 17 months later. And I wrote a piece when one of the things, again, if I want to share with you the sentiment of the country, we all went through this extreme experience of the release of the hostages that was so happy on one hand and so horrifying on the other hand, because you saw what they did to these people. And when I saw that on the day that the Bibi's family were brought back in coffins in the horrific way that it was done, I wrote probably the most angry, dramatic op-ed I ever wrote. We have to understand we are confronting sheer evil. And it's still so very difficult for us to do that, but we have to understand that this is where we are. Now, the short history of the war is that it had 4 phases since that horrific day. In the first 3 months, the last quarter of 2023, although we were traumatized, terrified, Israel responded in the most impressive way. A united society, a united government, a good relationship with America, an army that recovered quickly. That was phase 1. Phase 2 was a war of attrition where Israel did badly on every one of these. The relationship with the administration deteriorated, the Israeli political unity disintegrated, society was split again, and the army did not do a good enough job. It was a kind of slow, ineffective war. The third phase was this miraculous strategic turnaround that we all remember with the pager operation and the attacks in Lebanon, that suddenly gave a feeling that from being a loser, we became the ultimate winner. Almost everything is fine. We are heroes again. We are the Entebbe people. We are the 6-day war people. Then came phase 4, which we are still experiencing, the hostage pause, the combination of the release of the hostages with this kind of ceasefire. And that exposed the fact that while we were not as defeated as we feared in the beginning of the war, we were not that triumphant in the way that we thought in a few months ago. And this is what creates a rather complicated situation where we are. Because there were spectacular achievements with Hezbollah, with Iran, and what happened in Syria. But actually, the original core issue of Hamas and Gaza was not solved. America, after 9, 10 very difficult months in Mosul, achieved victory. I mean, America with its ally. We did not achieve that. So on the one hand, Israel is so much stronger and robust than it was 6, 7 months ago. And the region respects us, and I think the world respects us. But on the other hand, actually, the core issue is not solved. So in a sense, you have what we are facing is a real case of unfinished business. This is where we are now. Now, before Nicole will ask about the specific questions. I think that, again, to tell you about the state of the nation, on the one hand, we celebrated Timna's birthday yesterday. We took her to a nice restaurant in Tel Aviv. I'm telling you, you cannot have better food in Manhattan. It was amazing. The restaurant was full. Life is everywhere. The vitality, it's pouring here. People are celebrating. We cannot sleep at night because there are so many parties all around us. Life is back. Israel is back. It's amazing. But on the other hand, there is a cloud hovering about all of us. The trauma has not been resolved. And what's worse, all the core issues that were exposed, our political disability or inefficiency, our split society, all these issues were not solved. And so were the issues around us, as I just said, in the world around us. I'll give you just as an example. When I was in Beirut on Thursday, and you say, what's real Israel? What's the Israeli Air Force? The Israeli Air Force that did science fiction in Iran in October 24, or the Israeli Air Force that never arrived in the kibbutzim of Otef Gaza on October 23. It's such a split screen. It's such two dimensions to the Israeli phenomena and to the Israeli condition that it's almost mind-boggling. And the same is with politics. I said it before, but I'll say it again. Real Israel is so amazing, so inspiring, so the solidarity, the innovation, the energy, the resistance, the vitality. And political Israel is so dysfunctional, totally dysfunctional, even after the October 7th trauma. So I think that as we will begin to talk about the specific issues, I'll say just as an opening statement, in my mind, there are three major issues now. One is Gaza. We will have to deal with Gaza. One is Iran. We will have to deal with Iran. And three, in a lehavdil, is Israel. We still have to fix Israel. We have not yet begun the serious, deep work of fixing Israel. I really ask for your discretion here. I'll share with you my thoughts, which are not too optimistic. I believe, and I think that this is also the assessment of the government here, that the chances right now of having the grand deal regarding the hostages, of bringing all the hostages back, are not high. And I'm being cautious. I personally, I'm totally committed to doing everything to bring everyone home. I think the slogan, the demand is absolutely right. And I think we all understand why. Again, talking about Israel, I don't think there is any other country that would have done what Israel is doing for the hostages, because this is who we are. Again, and it may be our strength, it may be our weakness, but this is us. This is the Israeli solidarity, the Israeli extended family. So we are absolutely committed to bring them all back. In practical terms, I think that achieving that through a major deal in the coming weeks or months are very low. So what's happening at the moment is actually that Israel, and again, I ask for your discretion, convinced the American envoy to come up with this plan of trying to release half the hostages, basically, now, and then see what happens. But here, and again, I'll be cautious because I try not to criticize or American administrations, but there has been something of a blunder in the American diplomacy in the last 2 weeks. We have one envoy who is, I think, very serious, very impressive, doing great work, and then we had another envoy. I think most of us in these conversations are old enough to remember George McGovern. I think he came up with a kind of George McGovern ideas that were really dealing with Hamas, giving him major mistakes were made, and you have to correct those mistakes. Bottom line, I think there's every effort to bring as many hostages as possible now, because the Hamas offer is impossible. It's just one person, although we want to save him, of course, one living person. But the best we can hope for at this stage is a deal that brings 5 to 10 hostages in the coming 2 months. And the question remains, and that will have to do with your next questions, what happens next? Look, everybody, the good news is really that everybody, we knew it, is that everybody, all the moderates in the region want the Hamas gone. The bad news is no one is willing to do the dirty work. And not as leading Arab diplomats and leaders told even me personally. So we will not put $1 into Gaza Strip as long as Hamas is there. We will not make an investment once again that will be destroyed in a few months or a few years. And who will get the Hamas out? Martians, Norwegians, Canadians, who will get Hamas out? So actually the feeling right now, again, I'm talking about the Israeli establishment, both the political and the military, is that war is almost inevitable, because you will have to crush Hamas before the Emirates and the Saudis and whoever will be willing to step in and do real work. So I'll get to the Egyptian plan in a second. But I say what troubles me, first of all, I'm not happy about going back to war. The war in some ways will be, if it resumes, will be easier in the sense that Israel has more weapons now, and the army is more trained, aggressive, focused than it was. There are two dangers. One is that the region will be less tolerant to Israeli activity. And in this sense, diplomatic events of the last months, without getting into specifics, have made things more difficult. All the Arab leaders are much more cautious, much more cautious. They've been quietly loyal to the alliance of the moderates. They've not supported us openly, but quietly. It's going to be more risky if it's resumed. And the other issue that has to do with the Israeli condition, look, we were saved by our reservists. The government failed, the generals failed, intelligence failed, and it's ordinary Israelis who fought, the combat soldiers, the reservists, who saved the country. Many of them are in a state of fatigue. And resuming the war now is not going to be easy. So on the one hand, this split screen, this moment that we are talking all around is split screen. So on the one hand, objectively, strategically, there seems to be a need to go back to the war after the hostages are released. But it's beyond the fact that wars are not nice. It's a risky situation, because we didn't fix our politics, we didn't unite as society, and we'll be asking our 25-year-old, 30-year-old reservists to save us again after the system and society failed them. And will they be there the way they were in October, November, and December of 2023? No one knows. Generally in Israel, you have there's a general agreement on doing everything possible to release all the hostages. The commitment to the hostages is very strong, right, left, and center. But on the other hand, Israelis have become much more hawkish. And perhaps when we talk about Israeli politics, we'll talk about that. So I think that in a sense, Israelis want the two things. They want all the hostages out, but they do want to crush Hamas. I mean, people, and this goes back to what I said before, the sense that no one will have a political future in Israel if he doesn't understand the trauma Israelis went through and the kind of determination they have not to be exposed to barbaric evil. This is the dominant sentiment of the country. And so I don't think that people, I'm not sure the government or the army have found a way how to balance these two somewhat contradictory feelings, but they are very, very powerful at the moment. I want to be cautious with American presidents. I always was. On the one hand, there is a feeling that America supports Israel almost, in a almost unprecedented way. While it seems that your government is fighting with most of America's allies, we've become the real 51st state. So we are like and there is a strong feeling of comfort with that. But there is a level of unpredictability in the way American policy is being run at the moment, and therefore people are wondering. So there is. Look, the fact that America supports us, by the way, it was true, and I'm really bipartisan in this sense, profoundly. I think altogether, you think about all the trouble we went through, you went through all the Colombian protests, all this, and at the end of the day, America stood by Israel and stands by Israel. And it's very comforting. But we live in a crazy world. Everything is uncertain. You don't know what will happen tomorrow, and we live in a dangerous environment. So the Egyptian plan has two wonderful things, which is bringing a lot of money to Gaza, $53 billion, and having no Hamas, although it doesn't point out how to do it. But it relies on the two-state solution, on the Palestinian Authority, in a rather naive way, I would say. We really need creative solutions for Gaza. I'm not sure we have the time now. I'll be happy to send all of you an article I wrote about my own Gaza plan, which is to double or triple its size into northern Sinai. I think that's the only way to deal with the Gaza problem. Right now, we went from one very audacious plan that was totally outside the box to rather banal, old-fashioned plans that don't deal. There is an issue here that has to be dealt with intellectual courage, So I think there is an opening actually here to do something different, and basically it is based on putting pressure on the Egyptians for once, in my mind, to give 1,000 square kilometers in northern Sinai to their Palestinian brothers, so that a Palestinian Riviera can be built without Palestinians being transferred or forced out of their homes. I think that's the best solution possible. Right now, it's not going that way, and therefore, the Arabs who were terrified by the Trump plan brought a plan that sounds okay, but is actually cannot work. The prime minister and 60-70% of Israelis say no Hamas, no Abbas. They definitely don't want Hamas, and there is a problem there. Because if it's not Abbas, who will run Gaza? Again, Danish people, who will run it? So I think that long-term, again, I'm not naive about the Palestinian Authority. I was Abbas skeptic 20 years ago when it was very unfashionable. I never thought there was real peace in the guy. But the Palestinian Authority did give us calm in the West Bank. And it worked in many ways with all the corruption and all that. I don't think the Palestinian Authority is strong enough as it is now to rebuild Gaza. But I think it has, in some sort of way, to be part of the grand plan. The only real hope is the moderate Arabs. It's Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and the other moderate Arab countries. And I really hope, when we talk about American leadership, that the president and his team can bring the moderate Arabs to do what they've not done in the past, which is to make a real contribution to dealing with the conflict in all kinds of creative ways. I suggested one, but I think there are several others. Sadly, the Palestinian political body has extremists on the one hand and dysfunctional bodies on the other hand. So they, and that's their tragedy and our tragedy. Right now, they will not solve the problem. So we have to help. We have to chaperone them in a way, and chaperone and shape the process, not counting on an entity that is not really robust enough to do the work. sadly, I think that resumed war sooner or later, it doesn't have to be in a few weeks' time, maybe in a few months, is likely. I mean, it's not, the one force that can stop it is Trump. If President Trump decides he doesn't want it, it won't happen. But the dynamics right now in Israel are towards resumed war. Sadly, as I said, I'll say two things. Israel emotionally, politically, socially is not totally ready for that. And the other issue, if you're going to have another horrible war in Gaza, you better have a political horizon. I said it before, if you're doing Dresden, you need an Adenauer. You need a prospect of where it's going. So if the old ideas are irrelevant and the new idea didn't fly, we do need to use this time in order to develop a fair, reasonable, realistic plan of how to rebuild Gaza, how to go towards some sort of coexistence, whatever way you want to call it. As I said, the key is the moderate Arabs, and we have to find a way to leverage that. Iran is a classic case of where the pendulum moved too far. We, in a sense, we were very worried about Iran, and then there was a sense that we defeated them. Neither was true. And let me try to explain what the picture. There are four elements to Iran. Their economy is in a disastrous situation. That's their Achilles heel, and there's a huge potential there. Then they had three layers of activities that were dangerous for us. Their terror basis, the Ring of Fire, has nearly collapsed, and it's definitely much weaker. So the situation is much better because there is no Hamas as an army, as a terror army. Hezbollah is weaker. They lost Syria. They are in a mess. But there are two other issues that were not addressed properly. One is Iran's ballistic missile capability and other conventional weapons. They are still very dangerous. And there was a kind of illusion, euphoria, that after the successful Israeli attacks, we solved the problem. We didn't solve the problem. We did amazing work. Our Air Force and intelligence and Mossad did amazing work. We didn't solve the problem. So the ballistic element is dangerous. I don't want to get into too many details right now, but it's a threat. And what's worse of all is the nuclear project. The whole thing was about stopping the nuclear project. Now, again, I want to talk about why is the cause so critical there? Because we've seen what evil can do. And I said it before, we saw how dangerous the combination of people with 11th century values with 21st century capabilities. If Iran goes nuclear, may God save us all. It's not only an existential threat to Israel, which it is, but the implication will be that the Middle East will be nuclearized. All these unstable countries, many of them crazy, you will have nuclear bombs in Turkey, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Algeria. And again, with the way, look at how the Poles are talking about getting nuclear weapons out. I mean, the implications of a nuclear Iran, really, they'll be felt in Manhattan in a serious way. It's not an Israeli issue. But we, Israel and America and the international community, failed in stopping. We have to be honest about it. We failed in stopping that project. Now they have fissile material for 6 bombs at 60% enrichment. In this sense, they can have it in a few weeks' time. So the need to stop Iran is critical. It's far more important than any other issue. So in my mind, the goal should be, the goal for the free world, for the international community, long-term, it should be regime change. Until there is a regime change in Tehran, and I know for many Americans, regime change is a dirty word. I'm telling you, in this case, it's crucial. Until there is a regime change in Tehran, there will be no stability and peace in the Middle East. There will be no two-state solution. There will be no anything. So long-term, it's regime change. Short-term, the urgent is to stop the nuclearization, to prevent nuclearization. Now, the best way to do it, again, without getting into war and Armageddon and all kinds of, it's a combination. This kind of maximum pressure policy is the right kind of policy. You have to try to choke Iran economically. I think it's possible. But you also need a credible military option. a robust, credible military option. Without it, because without that, they can try to break through. It's only when they'll know that if they try to play it dirty, they'll be attacked. That's the only thing that will stop. So you need these two. Then, historically speaking, there were two ways to stop such projects. One is what we did in Syria and Iraq, which was bombing. The other one, which was much more elegant, was Libya. The West was able to flip Muammar Gaddafi. It was a great work that done by the Americans and by the Brits, by the way, in flipping. So now Iranians will not give up anything on their own accord. But if the pressure, the economical pressure, will be really dramatic, and it'll be either survival or the regime or the nuclear project, I think there is a better chance of halting it, at least hoping that if you buy a few years' time, at the end of the day, it's the Iranians who have to save us from the Iranian nuclear project. So if you buy time, I think there is a good chance of that happening. So there are two, three issues. One is, again, objectively, the danger that Iran is Iran is like a wounded bear now. And if they'll decide that playing with the nuclear option is their thing now, that will be one danger. There is another danger that, Mr. Netanyahu that's his historical commitment. I mean, he's basically all about preventing the Iranian bomb or saving Israel from the Iranian. He's, in his mind, he's Churchill, they are Hitler, and he has to save Israel and the world. So when we talk about Israeli politics, if Mr. Netanyahu is about to lose power, I think that his need to deal with this issue before he's out will be a serious factor. So you have the objective element of how dangerous and immediate, how dangerous we established, I hope, how immediate the danger is. And then there is the Netanyahu factor, whether he decides. Previously, I thought that Mr. Netanyahu would want peace with Saudi Arabia to be his legacy. Perhaps we'll talk about it. That's less likely right now. And therefore, it may be that an attack on Iran will be his legacy. Bear in mind these two factors. My sense from afar, I'm not a Trump expert, is that he's a deal guy, that he would like to make all the commotion and frighten and all the noise, but striking a deal will be his first option. I will share with you some information between us that from my Israeli sources, I hear that they feel they have quite a lot of agreement with him, okay, or with his administration, which hints to perhaps another option. In this sense, what happened today, or the last 24 hours, the attack in Yemen on the Houthis, is a very important signal because it's a right way to frighten the Iranians beyond the Houthi issue, which perhaps we will discuss. So, look, when you had the Cuba Missile Crisis, the whole trick was to balance strategic threats with secret negotiations and reach a deal, not admit what your concessions were, only talk about the concessions of the other side. Great, let's do that. So if a good deal can be achieved, wider, longer, deeper, stronger than the 2015 deal, great, because the implications of the battle are. But I have the Iranians are very sophisticated, and although the hand is weaker, don't underestimate them. And I think, let's put it this way: Israel is getting ready for the possibility of a major military clash with Iran in the coming years. We cannot live with a nuclear Iran. I mean, we believe the world cannot live with a nuclear Iran, but with us, and again, the October 7th experience, it proved to anyone that it's, in Hebrew we say retzini, it's serious. It's not it's not just talk. It's not alarmism. I mean, the evil guys are serious guys. They really want to destroy us. And between us, they really want to take over the world. And therefore, they have to be dealt with. So if pressure, economic and strategic, leads to a good deal, great. But if not so, I think that the other option is very much on the table. One of the outcomes of the war, which people not always notice, that the Middle East has changed profoundly, because before that you had the radical Shiite axis and the emerging moderate axis, American-backed moderate Arabs and Israelis, which was the good news of the last 10 years, 15 years. Now we have a third axis. We have the Sunni extremist axis. The greatest winners of the war so far are Turkey and Qatar. Turkey is back. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the Turks back in Palestine in 1914. Okay, they've been gone. They are back now. They are our next door neighbors. So Turkey is becoming a major, major player. Qatar has managed to succeed in many ways with its maneuvering, and it's actually stronger than it was, although you could have thought it'll be different. So what you have is, right now, if I'll go one by one, the moderate axis regarding Israel, the leaders are quite close to us and potentially to America. We have a problem with the people. The people watch Al Jazeera and they hate us. And one of the reasons that the deal with the Saudi deal, which I was so hoping that will happen, is less likely, is that even if you are a dictator or a monarch, you care about your people. And for MBS now to shake Netanyahu's hand is to take the risk of becoming a pariah himself. And he was a pariah, he doesn't want to go back. So the moderate axis is there, the interests are there, but it's more complicated because of public opinion. And what makes things worse is that, and again, I don't want to elaborate right now, perhaps next, that for the first time in years, there are serious question marks about the future of Egypt and Jordan. Both countries are vulnerable. Jordan dramatically. By the way, if I was advising American policy, strengthen Jordan. It's the first thing that has to be done. If Jordan falls, we will be in deep trouble. But Egypt is vulnerable as well. Talking of the Houthis, for Israel, they were nuisance. For the Egypt, they killed the Egyptian economy. The Egyptian economy depends on the Suez Canal. So we have the moderate Sunnis, the weak moderate Sunnis, and the danger of the new, more aggressive, extreme Sunnis actually becoming more dominant. It's not as dangerous as Iran was. Turkey, and many people here, we go visit Turkey, we do business in Turkey. Turkey is part of our world, unlike it's not Iran, and it's part of NATO and all that. But Mr. Erdogan has imperial ambitions, and he is an Islamic Brotherhood person. And suddenly he controls an Arab country to indirectly. I mean, the Turkish influence on Syria. Now, again, from our point of view as Israelis, the good news is that we've broken the Shiite axis there, and the threat from Hezbollah, it's major good news. But as you saw, for months, people were wondering about the new regime in Damascus, and you saw what they did to the Alawites last week. And you saw their new constitution, which is as extreme as possible. So the Islamic I don't know if how many people remember the Islamic Brotherhood threat of 13 years ago in Egypt. Now these forces are back. So again, they are not an immediate threat. They are not as dangerous as Iran, but you have aggressive Sunni forces. Now again, Turkey is like elegant. Qatar is elegant in another way, but they pay the bad guys. They fund them. I mean, how this leader now in Damascus is totally a Turkish project. So again, the Turkish government will not do the slaughter that he's doing, but they are his proxies. The bad news right now is Syria. By the way, it's not all bad. Okay, it's not all bad, but there is an emerging, again, it will not threaten Israel in the coming year or two, probably, I hope. And as you know, I have a daughter living by the Syrian border. I have a personal interest in the calm and serenity of that area, that beautiful part of the land. But you see that while there was a euphoria, okay, Assad fell, the Iranians are weaker, and so on. Surprise, surprise, what is emerging in Syria is not a liberal democracy. Shocking. And therefore, you have a much more complicated map. Okay, before that, I mean, we had the Iranians, but it was like clear. So it's a bit like in the Cold War. There were good guys, bad guys, it was clear. Now with this third axis, there's something much more complicated. By the way, even the axes are, I mean, I want to remind you something that Henry Kissinger said, that the politics of the Middle East is the most sophisticated in the world, okay? Because it's so complex. Now it's becoming more complex here. Look, there are so many partnerships here. People are friends on Mondays and enemies on Thursdays. There are enemies in the south and they collaborate in the north. Everybody's like frenemies. So the whole thing is like clay. You know, it's like this. It's a very unstable. Again, there are many opportunities in that, but dangers as well. Basically, Israel's policy in Syria, and by the way, that's our lesson from October 7th. We want buffer zones. We understand we cannot defend Israel from our own borders, and therefore, on every front, we want buffer zones beyond our borders. And in Syria, we were able to create that. That's dangerous in itself because long-term, we know that turns people against you and you expect trouble. But right now, that's a policy. The other element of our policy is to reach out to the Druze, okay, to the Druze minority in Syria and have an alliance. Now, if I may, I'll get to Lebanon and then I'll combine the two. Lebanon is good news because while the situation in Metula, Israel's northern border, is not what we wanted, there is no buffer zone that is good enough. I say there's bad news in Metula, there is good news in Beirut. Because in Beirut, there is a political process that is everything we wanted. It's still in its early days. We don't know what will happen. But the moderates, because we militarily defeated Hezbollah, it's not gone, but they are so weaker, people have the courage to rise against them. And so many Lebanese hate Hezbollah. And no, Lebanon is our natural ally. You know, just make, Beirut and Tel Aviv are like sister towns. And the mentality, the entrepreneurial, the good life, everything. So things are happening in Beirut, in Lebanon, that can bring a good surprise. So I would say, roughly speaking, in Syria, there is more bad news than was first reported. In Lebanon, there is potentially good news. What is common to all of this, that the new Israeli approach, which I actually preach that, is initiative. We have to be an active, proactive regional power. We cannot just be a kind of fortress behind our walls. We have to be engaged in Middle East policy. We have to use our power, the power we have, in order to shape the geostrategic environment as much as we can. And I think that's a major change. And in this sense, I think that what, again, we are trying to do in Syria and Lebanon is interesting and possibly good. But again, the whole thing is in flux. Rumor has it that the president likes short, simple ideas. So if I had 3 minutes with him or his advisor or any one of you, and I'm sure some of you can deliver the message, I will say, President Trump, do what 4 presidents did. Be FDR of 1940 regarding Israel. Don't go to war. I don't expect you to do post-Pearl Harbor, but give Israel all the military and economic and intelligence and strategic support the way that FDR did to Churchill in 1940, so Israel can deal with Iran and with the other threats in the region in the best way possible as America's most loyal and strong and reliable ally. Mr. Trump, be Nixon. If you're going to do Nixon going to China, and if actually there is a logic behind what you're doing, which is to flip over the Russians, so Russia will be on the side of the West vis-a-vis China, do it. Don't let the Russians flip America. Make sure that Russia is the one that is being flipped over, and therefore, and the first test to that is Russia disengaging from Iran. If part of the move with Russia will be, and part of the deal in the Ukraine will be a siege on Iran, if the Russians don't support the Iranians, that will weaken Iran dramatically. Right now, I'm sorry to say that there isn't evidence of that happening. There is actually contrary. So do learn from Nixon and Kissinger and do that properly and do it that. Number 3, Mr. President, be Reagan versus USSR. You don't send the Marines to Moscow. You choke the empire of evil. Put all the economic pressure on Iran in a way, and Iran is vulnerable. Iran is it's not a paper tiger, but it's a kind of somewhere in between. In some ways it's very strong, in some ways it's so weak. With real dramatic economic and diplomatic pressure, the chances of the regime there collapsing are very great without boots on the ground, without America getting into any trouble. And then number 4, Mr. Trump, be Mr. Trump. Finish the Abraham Accords. Put real pressure on the Saudis and on the Israelis to get the regional peace. That will change everything. If there will be a Saudi-Israeli peace, that will mean peace between Israelis and the Arabs, peace between the Jews and the Muslims. Because MBS and the Saudis have the religious element. It's not only the economy and the oil and all that. That will lead to peace with Indonesia, to peace with the Arab. We can actually, in 2 or 3 years, move to a totally different situation. And then dealing with Gaza and the Palestinian issue and all that will be much more possible. So use the fact that you are a tough guy. You are rough. You are not polite and elegant. Use it. The Arab leaders are very much speak your emotional language. They understand power, money, and honor. Use that. And use the pressure on them. Now, if you make Saudi the builder of the new Middle East, they can fund moderates in Lebanon, they can fund moderates in Syria, they can fund the Gaza rebuilding project, they can put pressure on Egypt. Say to Egypt, you don't have to pay a dime of the 30-40 billions you owe us, or you owe but give the land needed in order to solve the Gaza problem. Yeah, so many. There is chaos, there is enormous danger, but there is amazing possibilities. So with a kind of realistic approach, and again, without insulting anyone, I think everybody has to acknowledge that the paradigms of Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, Israeli doves, Israeli hawks, were all wrong. We didn't deal with the Middle East properly for decades. So in this dramatic moment, there is an opportunity. And if, I think I've said it before, I think that if President Trump had Henry Kissinger or James Baker by his side, there is enormous potential of doing great deeds in the Middle East. Again, look, October 7th happened because of October 6th. because we were so divided for a year, we invited our enemies to attack, and there was evidence. It was clear, as you remember, I've been trying in the year before the war broke out to bring some sort of unity with the help of some few people, and people didn't listen. They went into this, and I said it before. I'll say it again. I'm a Jewish patriot. I really believe in Jewish exceptionality and in Israeli exceptionality. I think we are amazing. We have a major flaw with this destructive gene in us that goes to extremism, to dividing ourselves, to tribalism and destruction, and that was our history. And I always say, the horrible example is that in the Warsaw Ghetto, the socialists and the nationalists couldn't fight the Nazis together. So we went through this process. We committed political suicide. We invited our enemies to attack us. They did. Horrible things happened, and we learned the lessons for 6 months. And ever since, we're going back to our old ways. So I'll give you one specific example. The government, we are facing a crucial date, political date, on March 31st, because they have to pass the budget. If Netanyahu passes the budget, he's pretty much safe in office for the next year and a half. If he doesn't, we'll go to elections. But in order to pass the budget, he is going to give the Haredi the ability not to serve in the army. Now, we know now, before it was theoretical, now we know we don't have enough soldiers. I'm telling you, we don't have enough soldiers. And there are two elements to that are corrupting us. One, we actually need these yeshiva bochels. We actually need them. It's not a luxury. But the other issue is, will the reservists go to army when they know that the political system is so corrupt that the others don't bother to serve or contribute in any sort of way? So in order to survive politically, Netanyahu will have to pay a price that is a real direct sabotage of the war effort. Now, I'm not blaming only him, because it's the crazy politics we have. And I think those of you who've heard me about my political vision to Israel, we need a Zionist government. We need to unite the moderate right, the center, and the moderate left, so the government will be built from the center. Because right now what happens is that when the left wants to be in power, they surrender. They're hostages of extreme anti-Zionist Arabs. And when the right wants to be in power, they surrender to extreme anti-Zionist Haredi. It's crazy. 70-80% of Israelis are decent and good and hardworking and contribute. But we give our politics to these two small extreme groups. So the fact that we didn't fix this, that we didn't use, again, I'll use the term I used in one of my previous conversations, real Israel is amazing. It's a combination of individualism and community, of innovation and liberty with the solidarity. It's East and West, tradition and modernity. It's amazing. All of you know Israel now. Political Israel is a disaster. It's a crime, because they take minor differences and make them huge differences. And I'm telling you, the optimist in me believes that the silent, huge majority of Israelis is there. We need the next government to be a government that is based on all the people who serve in the army, who study, who work, who learn. And again, I'm for equality and rights for everyone, for the Haredi and the Arabs. They're all good people. But the process, the country has to be led from the center right. And right now, this is not happening. So the disconnect. Now think of it. So many young people I know are they're endangering their lives. They went to 200, 300 days of reserve duty. Their girlfriends don't talk to them anymore. Their businesses are collapsed, and they're still doing it, while the politicians up in Jerusalem are doing their corrupt games. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. So this is where we are. Now, within that, I don't want to get into details, the issue with the head of the Shabak and the Attorney General. It's horrible. Again, I think that I have criticism. I think the Attorney General made some mistakes. There are no saints. It's not that all the truth is all the justice on one side, but you don't do that in the middle of the war. You don't do it anyhow. But in the war, when we talk about the fact that we may be sending our boys again to get killed in Gaza in a month's time, and before that, you attack the institutions of the state. Look, there was a lot of criticism of Ben-Gurion for being a Bolshevik, and partly justified. But Ben-Gurion used his power in order to do institution building. The great success of the Zionist movement, Herzl did it when we had nothing. They built institutions, a Supreme Court, a Knesset, universities, civil service. Now we're destroying our institutions. Now, how you have some problems in America, but how will we survive in this jungle, in this crazy environment without solid institution and a sense of solidarity and, excuse my French, a sense of decency? I think we have great emerging leaders in Israel. They are my two sons. They happen to be 20-year-old and 15-year-old.
Until then.
I don't want to repeat the word disaster, so let's use another D. It's a desert. I mean, Mr. Netanyahu, with all his flaws, and his many, and mistakes, is a very talented politician. And the mistakes done by the opposition and the protest movement, I mean, the fact that after such a failure, in such a horrible situation, after 17 months, he's the leading, he's the most popular leader. It's not because of him. It's partly his talent, but it's because the flaws of the opposition and sadly the protest movement that I thought was an amazing movement when it began, but made so many mistakes. So we, and now again, I don't want to get into party politics. I work with these people. I actually like them personally, almost all the potential alternative leaders. But it's a huge failure. It's a huge failure. And therefore, I think that, and I'll say something, even about the work that I'm doing, I think we are really facing, it's a cliche, but it's so true. We are facing a make or break moment. Because what I said about the Middle East is definitely true about Israel. Several things happened. One, October 7th exposed the weaknesses and the flaws of Israel, but also the strength. Two, we went through a trauma that no other democracy went through in recent years. So on the one hand, the need to build the country, to rebuild, to restart the nation is dramatic. The potential of doing it is high because people realize there is a problem. But so far, it hasn't been done. So let me say in a sentence what is so needed and what I'm trying. First of all, we need a kind of military buildup. And again, don't be afraid of it. It's what Roosevelt did in the 1940s, what Reagan did in the 1980s. We have to do that. Without strength, we won't survive. At the same time, we need a realistic approach to the Palestinian issue, understanding that there won't be a two-state solution tomorrow, but something has to be done. We need, which is very important, when you are faced with such evil, on the one hand, you need to be very strong, and on the other hand, you have to be very cautious not to be contaminated. We don't want to become even a bit like our neighbors. So we have to develop a concept of Israeli power, Israeli strength that is based on morality, on education, on enlightenment, on democracy, but force. Israel, at its essence, is a frontier democracy. Now, if you think of the world, this is where the world is going. If the good people in the world will not address the need to produce power and be forceful, we will have fascist regimes everywhere. This is where we are going. Now, being a passionate Zionist and a passionate Israeli, Israel did that. When we were faced with the tragedy of the conflict in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, We developed an amazing model of young Israel that had the balance of Sparta and Athens, the Weizmann Institute and the Air Force. We understood that in order to survive here, we need to be smart, we need to be well educated, we need a strong economy on the one hand, but solidarity on the other hand. Again, there were flaws there, but we had a kind of balance. And what happened, the major flaw of the last 20 years, that we thought we are okay, that if we have high tech and business, we are okay. And that's not the case. So the elections, again, if the government will fall by March 31st, it'll be this year. If not, it'll be next year. But the next elections are crucial. And what I'm trying to do in my humble way is to develop the vision and the ideas. My idea is to write a kind of manifest that expresses the values of 60-70% of Israelis, that offers a way of uniting and again, leaving the extremists aside and giving the leaders who don't have the time to do the work themselves the conceptual tools and the policy tools in order to deal with the situation. I'm telling you, it's if we don't change political Israel, if we don't take the energy of real Israel to political Israel and transform Jerusalem, so to speak, we are in real trouble. Real trouble. People will not be willing to take it anymore. Many young people, just one second, many young people are leaving. Many people gave the country a chance and they will not give it a chance. But on the other hand, I'm telling you, the optimist in me, the believer, if we do the right thing, the positive energy that can erupt from this nation is the sky is the limit. I think, again, one element, and if I may, I'll share with you that I've been working the last year with my foundation on a kind of national strategy for Israel. It was pretty much endorsed by the leadership of the IDF. 10 days ago, I published an article, a concise article of the outline of that, and the new chief of staff of the IDF has distributed it to all the senior officers in the army. So that's the kind of work that we have to go to this balanced, assertive national strategy. I don't want to go into the details of it, but again, Israel is unique security problem. We became stronger, we lost our strategic mind. So that's one element. The second element is, by the way, that also is important in order to convince the people that democracy is not weak, that people who are Democrats can talk about creating power and projecting power. The second element is political reform. In a sentence, Singapore is not a democracy, but we need something like a Singaporean civil service. Israel, one of the things we did here is that while everything private boomed here, we neglected the public sector and the government, and it went into decay. We cannot, so we have to revive the government, but again, in a business-friendly way, in an effective way, not in the old socialist way. So that needs to be dealt with. The third element, we must integrate the Haredi and the Arabs into society. It's crucial. It's crucial that there are 30-40% of society, they cannot be aside, not contributing. And we need a kind of uniting ethos. So in a sense, it's reviving the right kind of government, uniting society, and giving a renewed Zionist ethos. I participate in, 100 strategic discussions, economic discussions in the last few months. Each one of them ends when people say to me, Ari, the most important thing is a narrative. We need a new narrative. Please write the narrative. So that is crucial. Okay, we need, and this is when I talk about the Sparta-Athens thing. That we need to do that. So that's the work I'm doing. And I think that rebuilding, again, not center in the narrow political sense, but the most dangerous thing about Israeli society, it became like a centrifuge. The forces going to to the extremes have become so strong, and we lost the center. The center is something holding the entire society together. So rebuilding a kind of center, I think, is it's an essential mission, and I'm trying to do my best to promote that.
And you do believe that the Israeli public is hungry for it, receptive to it, etc. This isn't just this just an idle wishful.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's a combination. I think a lot of the things I described are relevant to America, to Europe, to the free world. But there are some issues that are specific, Israel specific. It's a combination of the two. It's so you have to deal with. By the way, I think we need to be what I call a lighthouse nation. I think it's in the Jewish genes to be not just about ourselves, but bringing something. I think that was what the Zionist movement was about when it started. And I think, and I don't have to tell you, the world is going, the crisis of democracy, the crisis of the world order, and the AI revolution are creating a dramatic situation for all of us. And I think Israel is just in the right size to be a kind of laboratory for ideas that can actually inspire humanity. So it might sound a bit optimistic, but I believe it. So I think that while solving our own issues, there is an amazing opportunity here to help the free world, because some of the problems the free world is now experiencing, we are here. We have the experience and we have the talent in many ways. But again, we have to make it political. I'm not into any party, any specific leader, but we have to rebuild, excuse my terminology, we really have to rebuild Jerusalem. If we rebuild Jerusalem, Israel will be great. Israelis are very threat focused. So when you had the marches in the universities that were threatening us, and we saw this, wave of anti-Semitism, and people were furious, and it was part of everything that has happened. I think that right now, when things are changing in America, I think people are less focused on that. But I think, look, I think that again, I want to be cautious with American politics, but I believe in balance. I really believe in balance, and I think that what happened is that things, not only regarding Israel, things went to such an extreme in America and elsewhere that it brought a kind of very powerful counter reaction. And I somehow hope that the pendulum will find its right place. For many years, the Iranians have been saying apparently to themselves, Israel has the will and doesn't have the capability. America has the capability and doesn't have the will. And this is where my idea about, and what I talked about, Roosevelt of 1940 should be. I mean, I think that the best solution is that, America will help Israel have much greater capability. So again, this is a sensitive issue. I cannot share with you everything I know. I believe that I pretty much know. But it doesn't. You don't have to be a strategic genius to understand that, on the one hand, Israel developed incredible capabilities for a small nation. We saw it in October of 2024. But Iran is a major challenge. It's a huge country. There are sophisticated people. And therefore, I think the Iranians have to be convinced that there is really, and I repeat every word, a credible, robust military option. Again, like the Romans saying, if you don't want war, you actually need that capability. The only thing that will threaten these people is the fear that tomorrow morning Tomahawk missiles or Israeli-like Tomahawks will come through the window. And without that, the Iranians will find a way of manipulating, lying. They are so good at that. So, in a sentence, trying to be cautious, but to say something, I think there is a military option. I think it should be stronger. And in order for it to be stronger, you need intimate American-Israeli alliance. I have a lot of criticism of Netanyahu, but I don't share the kind of the total Netanyahu paranoia, that he's like that everything is politics and Netanyahu. If there is one issue that Netanyahu is totally sincere about, is the Iranian issue. Again, I think there are some people here who know Netanyahu better than me, but I know him a bit, and Netanyahu is a person that, for better and for worse, corresponds with history on a daily basis. He really thinks history. That's his forte. He has, again, many weaknesses. So he was right in seeing the Iranian threat, the Iranian challenge, as the most important challenge around. He made many, many, many mistakes, and in some ways he failed. So his record is a complicated one, but I wouldn't put it as a kind of cynical. I don't think that Netanyahu will attack Iran in order to stay in power, if that was the question. No. But the sense of mission, the sense of the messianic sense of mission he has, can lead him to taking action in a way that may be dangerous as well. So it's a factor. There is a danger there. Again, I want to be precise and balanced. I was a kind of Iranian hawk for 15 years, but I never believed in the military option. I thought we should do the Reagan option. We should choke them and kind of economic diplomatic siege. We are in a very serious place where a military option may be the last resort. So I would have loved to have the best government possible. Netanyahu was a strategic understanding, historic understanding, and the best cool-headed people around him, so they can do the decision-making in a proper way. My concern that right now Israel is run in a way that is not. It's not like that. When I just another sentence on. When Netanyahu was elected in 2009, he had an amazing cabinet, war cabinet. He had Ehud Barak, he had Dan Meridor, he had Benny Begin, he had Moshe Alon, he had a few others. They had really serious strategic discussions that never leaked, no politics. We don't have that now. We are in a crazy populist political environment. And when it comes to taking critical, dangerous, historical decisions in such a political environment, one is concerned. In one way, Iran is Nazi Germany. If they become nuclear, they're as dangerous as Nazi Germany. In another way, they are almost a ridiculous entity. They don't have the real power that Germany had in 1938, okay? So this is why it's shame on us. Shame on us. This is a cancer that can be dealt with. And it's only the Western lack of willpower that enables them to become so dangerous. I think I'm a realistic optimist. In both societies, the Arab-Israeli society and the ultra-Orthodox society, with all their differences, there are huge revolutions happening at the grassroots level. And the other day, I saw a wonderful documentary about the Haredi young lady from Jerusalem, American-born, who became Israel's marathon champion. Okay, that's where the Haredis are. There are changes there. They are not the Haredi of 30, 40 years ago. In a sense, they're becoming a bit more like the American Haredi. Okay, there is a yearning there to join modernity. There are changes, by the way, led by women and youngsters. The problem we have is with the political establishment and the Rebbeite establishment. So I think there is a kind of Haredi perestroika going on, but we have to help them. Going back to the Reagan example, if we will help the forces of change in Haredi society, I think that actually the Haredi issue from being a burden can be an opportunity. Think of hundreds of thousands of talented, smart people joining the workforce, joining the economy. It can help us. But in order to do that, you need a government that is not kept hostage to their politicians. Without any getting into details, pretty much the same in the Arab-Israeli. There are, while I believe in the general Zionist silent majority, there are like silent majorities, or at least huge minorities within these minorities that want change. So I think the change is possible, but it can only happen if there is a fine, decent, effective, wise government. Early conversations, even a year ago, I said the main achievement of the war that is not given credit is what did not happen. What did not happen is the collapse of the Arab-Israeli peace agreements. What did not happen is a third intifada in the West Bank. And what did not happen is a rebellion of Israeli Arabs, the way we had in 2020. That's a great success in the war. That's where Sinwar failed. That's where he miscalculated. But all these achievements are very fragile, very fragile. So the situation in the West Bank is very troubling, very troubling. And it's a combination of the fact that while probably Hamas is less popular in the Gaza Strip, it's more popular in the West Bank. And our extremists are doing everything possible to dismantle the Palestinian Authority. And as I said, although I'm not a believer in the Palestinian Authority that we can sign a peace agreement with them tomorrow, but they gave us the cooperation with them, gave us prosperity and relative calm for 15, 20 years. So if Israeli extremists, Palestinian extremists, there is something brewing there which is very, very dangerous. Thank God, talking of the Shabak, the IDF and the Shabak have done amazing work. I think there were like 3 terrorist events a day prevented in the last year. Okay, that's where we are. But that's thin ice. That's thin ice. And this is why I say we need something positive, and perhaps it's a good way to end it. For the conflict, for the region, we need a realistic, positive vision of where we're heading. Even if we need to use force before that, we need to know that it's bringing us to a better place in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. And when Israel, we have an expression in Hebrew, be'en chazon yipara am. Without a vision, a people cannot survive. It's true for all peoples. It's definitely true for us. So the need for something inspiring but realistic that will have this balance of making Israel strong but just is essential. We need a vision for the region, we need a vision for the conflict, and we need a vision for ourselves.